Hello there, and welcome to this episode of the LinkedIn Marketer. My name is Karen Hollenbach, and today we're going to explore using emojis on LinkedIn. Now, I've sat on the idea of sharing this with you for a number of years, believe it or not, because I feel like exploring this topic is a little bit like telling people what to do. And that's not really a place I come from. I always like to share insights. So I'm trying to approach this topic with grace because if I worked with you one on one, it would be absolutely one of the first things I would say to you, look, I highly recommend you don't use emojis, and here's why. Whereas when I share these sorts of insights or when I write about issues like this, what I'd rather do is put the information that helps me navigate using emojis on LinkedIn in front of you. And then as an adult, you can make a decision about how you're going to approach it. So I'm going to start here. This is why I avoid using emojis on LinkedIn. So as you know, LinkedIn is not Instagram, Slack, or a group chat with your closest colleagues. It's a professional platform designed to create or build credibility. And it's where you share your expertise, connect meaningfully, especially if you're a senior leader, subject matter expert, or seeking a board role, let's say in Australia. So your use of emojis in that context is going to depend on what sort of a relationship, or I mean, it's a digital platform, so you don't have a relationship, but what LinkedIn means to you in terms of how you show up as a professional. And so what I've noticed over the years is there's been this growing trend with what I'm going to call the liberal use of emojis to punctuate posts, highlight points, or inject personality. And while I think I understand the intent, it's sort of a bit playful, and it's to make content more engaging, I've also heard people refer to it as sort of being more sort of humanizing, which, okay, that's how other people have described it. Here are the reasons why I don't use emojis on LinkedIn. So I feel like using emojis on LinkedIn can undermine the seriousness of your message. So when you're sharing an insight on say, sort of leadership, governance, policy, how to elevate your LinkedIn presence for your career or representing your organization's voice, using emojis might feel sort of incongruent or sort of inconsistent, or that you're not taking sort of things as seriously as you should or could. And I'm always sort of careful to talk about the shoulds. That's a decision for you to decide. So in that way, I think they sort of could also risk diminishing your credibility. So if in the context of an executive or a board or in academic circles, I think clarity and professionalism matter. And so if your audience is assessing your judgment, tone, or strategic thinking, your message needs to speak for itself. And that really is at the heart of why I avoid using emojis. Well, there's one other main reason, but that idea that I'm a writer, I write people's LinkedIn profiles, I help people manage their LinkedIn presence and their marketing communications and their LinkedIn strategy. So I need to be able to craft words that can articulate what I mean and not sort of lean on emojis to help me do that. I think also emojis on LinkedIn can distract rather enhance what you're trying to say. So that's sort of maybe a similar idea, but that idea that, well, if it's not clear when I read it, why do I need to sort of use an emoji to tell the story? So I want that sort of clarity. And they're also not always inclusive. And I mean that from two perspectives. So the first perspective is they may not be visually inclusive for people who use screen readers, so that they can't necessarily read the emoji. It would appear or it would sound not what sort of, it doesn't describe what the emoji is. And also culturally, the use of emojis, so they could be interpreted out of the context that they were meant. And so it's sort of dangerous territory if you don't understand how some people might interpret the use of certain emojis. So some digital marketers do say it's okay to use emojis on LinkedIn, and they use some of the reasons I've shared earlier, the sort of the humanizing, the injecting your brand. I know someone who's quite attached to the Shamrock because that's her sort of area of interest, her Irish heritage. I see lots of other digital marketers use them on LinkedIn. I think that a lot of people have advised the use of using emojis on LinkedIn. They break up dense content in longer posts. I know if you use generative AI, it can automatically give you emojis in posts. So let's talk about sort of guidelines for using emojis on LinkedIn, because I don't want to just sort of beat you over the head to say, that's not a good terminology, is it, beat you over the head? But I think you know what I mean by that. I don't want to sort of berate you about using emojis. I want to encourage you to think about it, to plant some seeds in your mind around, well, this is the context where it would be suitable for me. This makes sense for Karen, but it doesn't make sense for me. Actually, I really like the use of emojis, or, oh, thank you, I've had a bit of a think about this now and I'm not going to use them. So here's sort of some guidelines. So while emojis are common in digital spaces, I believe LinkedIn calls for probably a more measured and inclusive professional approach. Now, this is especially true if your goal and focus is to seek more senior roles, perhaps even board roles. So what I'd like you to think about is avoiding or limiting emoji use in formal profile sections. So I'm referring to your headline, probably your about section, your title. I don't think it needs to be in your LinkedIn profile, the use of emojis. You should be able to use words and the formatting tools available within LinkedIn to really tell your story without the use of emojis. Ensure your message makes sense without emojis. So that's sort of, I've talked about that from a couple of different angles already. Also, just think about your audience and their expectations, and is the use of emojis appropriate or not? I mean, you might be in a space where they're a completely used and accepted form of communication. So if that's the case, then maybe it does apply to you and you might use emojis. And really just lean on text that everyone can read and is completely inclusive and is not necessarily open for interpretation to communicate your ideas clearly. So I'm trying to offer some suggestions there that don't just say why not to use emojis, but maybe how you might like to approach using it. So in my approach to LinkedIn, I aim for clear, respectful, and well-structured content that reflects who I am and what I value. And hopefully today's episode and these tips and these thoughts have given you a bit of a food for thought around how you might choose to approach emojis on LinkedIn in the future. So thanks for listening. As always, I appreciate you tuning in. Do share this with anyone. Maybe you've got a prolific overuser of emojis or you've been discussing it as a team. Please do share this episode with them and check back in. There's other topics that you'd like me to share. I'd love to hear your thoughts, and I'll see you in a future episode.